Welcome to TRG 30. I'm Jill Robinson, CEO of TRG Arts, and today we're presenting a special TRG 45, using this platform to address and amplify a critical conversation for us as humans and in our sector. I'm joined today by Donna Walker-Kuhne, whom many of you know as a foremost expert in audience development in the arts. She will guide and facilitate our conversation today. We are joined by Roy Alexander Weise, renowned theater director in England and currently artistic director at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester. Their bios and deeper information is available in our announcement email to you. It will be available after as well. Together, they will talk with each other and you about what Donna aptly calls the twin pandemic of COVID and racism facing our country and our world. Before we get started, I want to deeply thank our guests who rearranged their schedules to join us today and to have this important conversation. I also want to remind you that today's conversation is just that, a conversation with you and our guests. Many of you have already submitted questions. For those of you who haven't, you can do that at any time using the Q&A feature. I'll help at some point into the conversation ensure that we're able to facilitate and address as many of them as we can. Finally, you'll receive a recording of this session in our email follow-up. Before I pose our first subject to Donna and Roy, I want to acknowledge the importance of this conversation for us all now and moving forward beyond now. With TRG and within TRG, this is important. I believe also that it's profoundly important, the future of this conversation for our sector. I also step into this space with humanity and humility on my heart and in my mind. Donna, we picked up and noted a quote that you recently made when you said, "I firmly believe that the arts are the only pure vehicle we have in today's society that crosses cultural and ethnic barriers and allows people to transcend their differences." That's a powerful why statement for our sector's work. So with that in mind, I want to hand off this dialogue to you, Donna, with a kind of level setting question that goes across national boundaries. And it's this: would you start by sharing your observations and characterizations of how arts and culture is or is not engaging with this dialogue at this time?
Certainly. Good morning, and thank you, Jill. And hello, Roy. I'm so excited to meet you. And so in response to your question, Jill, yes, the arts and culture community has been responsive to the most recent uprising of social unrest because of the murder of Floyd George. But of course, you know, we know that this pandemic is 401 years old from the beginning of slavery. But what has been inspiring to me has been, one, the mission statements that many arts and cultural organizations have made of a statement on standing in solidarity, a statement about the commitment to do better, statements about how they want to take action in the community. So this is the first time in my 40-year experience that I've seen such a massive response from arts and cultural communities across all genres. And that's been extremely inspiring. I've also seen the same kind of response from our corporations, from our civic organizations, the faith-based communities, and so that people are really standing up, and primarily these are white people, white organizations, white leadership that is stating that now is the time. And then, of course, yesterday we had the Blackout Tuesday, or how, that the show must be paused initiative. And that was where throughout, the country on, again, multiple platforms, there was a moment to pause and reflect on what can I do to transform society. Again, the reason why I think that's so significant, because it has a monetary impact. For instance, we had organizations like the Apollo Theater that paused their gala, which was scheduled for yesterday, Tuesday. It's now going to be Thursday, and other programs that some of them being monetized, some not, but it was a commitment to say this is more important. And so I believe in small steps. I'm not looking for huge waves of change, because that's not how things significantly change. I think it might make you feel good to see these large pronouncements, but ultimately it's one by one, each person taking full responsibility for what can I do where I stand to be a transformative agent, to respect the dignity of each person's life. So when we arrive at that point, that's when I believe we will have the kind of revolution we're all looking for, which is a peaceful one, but that will be transformative. So that's what's inspiring me. But I want to hear what Roy is thinking. Mr. Roy, where are you seeing things changing over in your neck of the woods?
It's really interesting. There's been like, I mean, yesterday morning it was really extraordinary. I had members of the team, I don't think I'd be wrong in saying that most of us are working in organizations that are predominantly white. And for me, especially during this time, whilst we have so many members of our team furloughed, I'm spending a lot of time in Zooms with predominantly white people. And yesterday morning, it was just really surprising to me, because I had members of my team going, Roy, we really need to do something. We really need to say something. And it felt in a small way really revolutionary to me that it happened that way round, because I think I am so used to being the person banging the drum and raising the alarm. And I think the thing that's really hard about that for a lot of Black people is that you feel as if people are tired of hearing you talk about it. You feel as if, like, there's a trepidation that comes with being that person, and anxiety that comes with being that person that feels like they need to let people know. So having, some of my white counterparts come to me and say, I really want to do something, that felt, huge. And it, it really felt as if like the world is finally paying attention essentially to something that I feel has been affecting me and other people like you and I, Donna, I guess, for our entire lives. And that feels really, really huge. Now, to see organizations responding in this way, I found, again, so fascinating. And there were a number of individuals and artists who were in some ways a bit pissed off about it, because they were like, well, that ain't gonna do anything for me. You posting on Twitter the same thing that everyone else is saying. But I think that's because as artists, we exist in the chambers that we do, and we surround ourselves with our tribes that make us feel comfortable and confident about, what we do in a really exposing industry. But actually, I think about the Royal Exchange, and I think about the National Theatre, and I think about the reach of those audiences, people who maybe have never received such a message directly from an institution.
That's right.
And I think actually, in some small way, that is a step. Obviously, for some people, because this is their entire existence, and because, again, there was another murder yesterday of a man in Kentucky, which again is not so like publicly known. And I think, like, when you feel as if like the clock is really ticking with regards to your life and the quality of your life, it feels in some ways as if those acts are meaningless, because actually they don't show the structural change that is needed to unravel like, you know, what you say, this virus that has been ravaging our world for centuries. So, yeah, I think that was interesting. I think also the way in which like the Blackout Tuesday kind of traveled around the world was interesting, because some of it was, I think, a bit confusing for some people, because some people were like, what do you mean just put up a black square and don't say anything? The world is listening and you want me to waste 24 hours not saying the things that are heavy on my heart and mind, that, you know. So I think some people were quite confused about that, but with as the day went on came more clarity and more openness. So there is like a level of optimism. It's really frightening in some ways, because I think that the internet can be and social media can be really dangerous, because everybody has and should have an opinion, but it means that like some voices feel louder to individuals than others do, and some criticisms feel louder than others do. But I still say that's a step, and I feel really pleased that that step has been made.
Yes.
But more, definitely more, and hopefully we can talk about how that more can happen.
That's the next dialogue point. We're going to talk about, you know, just what do we see happening now and for the future, and what do we recommend? You know, how do we guide our leadership and individuals, you know, as to be change agents? And I think that's a commitment and responsibility that we all have. Just a couple of things I've been thinking about that I think we can absolutely incorporate. But first of all, I believe a movement has to be framed in a philosophical context. I don't think it's just, okay, let's just wake up and start to do something. It's like, what's underneath it? You know, where does it emit from your life? And so there's two bookends that I have. One of them is my mentor. His name is Daisaku Ikeda. He's a world leader. And, you know, we, at the beginning of the pandemic COVID-19, you know, he had stated that we have the opportunity to become pioneers of a better age, you know. So I think that's the first thing. Let's just decide we're going to do this differently. And, you know, he writes that there's no other solution to the problem of racial discrimination than realizing the human revolution in each individual. In other words, an inner reformation in the depths of people's lives to transform the egoism that justifies the subjugation of others and replace it with the humanism they strive for, coexistence among all people. So to me, this is where this has to come from. Not that I feel bad, but fundamentally, as a human being, this is the transformation that we have to bring about. The second statement that is also very inspiring to me is by writer Arundhati Roy. And she states, and this is also in response to COVID-19, which of course we can now see we have twin pandemics. And she states that historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine the world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. And so this is, to me, where we are as human beings. And so there's a few points that I just wanted to share briefly that I think we can consider as action steps. These are also developed by Dr. Indira Itwaro from the Billie Holiday Theater in Brooklyn. She says, you know, this is for white cultural leaders and audiences. Use your social media and online platforms to underscore your support of justice for the African American community. Advocate to your funders and elected officials your stand for equitable funding for institutions of color. Create a radically welcoming space, not just for select Black artists and works, but for all Black audiences beyond Martin Luther King weekend and Black History Month. Visit our communities and institutions and invest in small businesses, and be the person who doesn't look like the majority of people in a space and experience the power of that perspective. And so those are some just ideas that I think are important and action steps. What do you think, Roy? What should the movement be going forward?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think those are really, yeah, they're really brilliant. Those and those steps don't feel like things that are unachievable. I would say, like, with regards to what you spoke about, with personal transformation,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really interesting because I feel like I, grew up in environments where maybe I wasn't necessarily, I don't know, I wasn't necessarily well versed in terms of like the variety of human being that you can be and the variety of lifestyles that there might be. But I underwent a period of personal transformation, discovering the experiences of other people, learning about other people, uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, you know, understanding why why different choices mean so much to different people. And also, I mean, ultimately, understanding that the choices that other people were making with regards to how they needed to live their lives, they weren't hurting me. So the fact that it wasn't hurting me meant that I could be open. I could be open and not feel threatened by the idea of change or changing myself to accommodate and tolerate the needs of others. And I would say that happened like, from my late teens through to my mid 20s. I just feel like I learned so much about
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so many different kinds of people, and I feel enriched from that experience. So it's not just about like our organizations. I feel like actually like being able to see that personal benefit of enrichment is an important thing, I think.
Yes.
um I think I mean, firstly, the thing that I would say as a warning is don't expect a medal, because because
Thank you.
I think sometimes when, as a Black person, when I engage in conversations, I think that there is a degree of people testing, some with conversations with white people, that there's a degree of testing whether what they've learned or what they're saying is right or not. And I understand that. But for somebody like me who's been living the life that I've been living for my entire life, I'm kind of like, everyone just needs to catch up. And I think, like, yeah, just be wary that like people won't praise you, and that's okay. And you should never expect people to praise you, because it's just about making sure that everybody's quality of life is as equal as it possibly can be, right? And
Mm.
nobody can get medals for that, in my opinion. um I think with regards to organizations and what they can do, I think the things that I might latch onto with regards to what you suggested. Having just very recently, I just began my role as artistic director, joint artistic director at the Royal Exchange in
Right.
November. And
Mm.
I spent the most of my time before that as a director in rehearsal rooms, kind of being a little bit blasé about budgets and finances, because they didn't touch the work that I did so specifically.
Right.
And,
Right. Right.
I'd kind of set up a relationship that meant that I could shut my eyes to what
Mm-hmm.
money was being spent or not being spent in order
Mm-hmm.
to achieve the things that a production might have needed. But being on the inside now and learning so much, the thing that has felt like the most profound learnings for me is that money tells such an interesting story. Finances and budgets tell such an interesting story. I look at some of our budgets with regards to audience development, and
Right.
we have spent maybe 100 times over that amount on like a single piece of set for a show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you wonder why people are mad.
Right.
And then you wonder why artists kick up a stink when they come to work in your spaces and bare their souls and and um and make the work and look up and they don't see people that look like them in the auditoriums. It's so
Mm-hmm.
destroying sometimes. So, I am the kind of person that is like, I would rather cut my production budget in half
Yes.
and reduce the amount of tickets, like, and make sure that like I can cast the net for this show as wide as I possibly can. I would rather do that. And in fact, I have done it as a freelancer. And I developed a bit of a thing with my agent that, like, the last thing that we bartered on before I would sign contracts was always about audience development. It was like, so how many tickets are you going to make available at a reasonable price? Because we're all doing dynamic pricing all over the world. We're all doing that because we need to, but we're still spending like hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds on set, on things, and not people. And so that would be the thing that the provocation that I give, like, think about the story that the money that your institutions and organizations has. And when you get to the end of a financial year and you look at that budget, what does that budget tell you about where you have invested? What does that budget tell you about who you have invested in?
Well, that's an excellent point. Thank you, Roy. Excellent, excellent. And Jill, you're back.
I am back, wanting to ensure that the questions that are coming across the transom get asked. And in fact, one of them, Roy, was about this, that you've just so well spoken about. Real values equal a financial commitment. And I think you've just suggested, the question is, how should we reevaluate our financial choices to make equity in our organization real? Donna, are there things that you would riff on in addition to what Roy has suggested before I move on to the next question? And if Roy, there's more you want to say, for sure.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just briefly, I so love hearing what Roy said, because I do believe the budget is actually the narrative of your organization. And so the commitment clearly is visible to what you really feel is a priority. In addition to, the financial piece is also how we speak to funders about how you want to use the money. So is it just for a new piece? Is it just for new work? So it's an education that happens on multiple levels. And so you're fundraising, not just to do the work, but also to build humanity, and that's an investment that we would expect our funders to have. So it's up to us to drive that narrative and not just say, oh, I'm gonna go for the low-hanging fruit. I know they want to produce this work. Oh yeah, okay, fine. But what about people? It's exactly as Roy said, 100% with them.
Okay, another question, what can arts funders do? What can arts funders do, maybe is the right emphasis on the right word. What would you both say to that? If you're a funder, what could you do?
Should I go, Donna?
Yes.
I would, I think, again, a lot of this is stuff that I'm becoming accustomed to now. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because what I would say, the thing that I would say is trusting the work that you're being asked to support is not always work that you can see you can't always very tangibly see the result of that work.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't necessarily measure how transformative like an experience of watching a piece of work has been for an individual, or at least we don't necessarily have access to all of that. Although I do know that there is there are a lot of studies that arts institutions are investing in, especially right now, with regards to the health benefits of the work that we do. But I would say sometimes trusting the artist is really important. Sometimes trusting and believing in the endeavor that the artist has, rather than necessarily seeing the numbers, like how many hundreds or thousands of people does it hit. Sometimes the numbers, like you said, low-hanging fruit. We always want to know, okay, right, if I give you £1 million, $1 million, I know then that this project is having an impact on the lives of 10,000 people, but that impact on those 10,000 people might end up being, I don't know, 3 days of engagement, but you could have 100 like people who have a year's worth of engagement, which means that whatever, you know, transformation or experience that we're hoping to give to these people, like in some way becomes so much more firmly rooted in those individuals becoming, you know, in a way disciples for whatever work we want to do beyond that. So like, I guess looking at how meaningful the engagement is, rather than the figures attached to that. You know, you can't pay for intellect.
So really, like, recalibrating the metrics.
I think so.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree. I just also would add that, you know, in addition to, you know, the funders looking at organizations that may be accustomed to applying for funding, now's the time for them to be proactive in who they're not funding. So there's so many arts organizations that represent people of color in all the genres. So how are they being funded? How do they become competitive in an already white construct that doesn't even speak to the cultural product that we produce? So how do we change that dynamic? That's what I would love to see funders create a new paradigm. Okay, so of course we're not going to throw the money out the window, but there are many legitimate arts organizations producing significant, impactful work. How can we make sure they are brought into this whole circle of funding? That's what I think.
Paige is saying, yes, those measurables are, the metrics are so important. So that's resonating here. Dorothy is asking this question. If you could make one recommendation for audience development and reaching new underrepresented audiences beyond a lower price point, what would that be?
So first, there's a difference between audience development and community engagement. Audience development is a transactional relationship, and that is where you are targeting a specific demographic for them to buy a ticket to see a show. Community engagement is creating access to the work, to the arts, where people live. And the success metric is not that they purchased a ticket, it's that there's participation. And that may be in some of the free events that you're doing. It may be that they are curious about what you're doing. So that's the first thing, is to be clear on your expectation. If the goal is to have diversity in your audiences, then I think the commitment is way beyond the ticket price. Quite frankly, I don't think that's the ultimate barrier. I believe the ultimate barrier is, one, feeling welcomed. Two, that there is something in this art that resonates with my heart and my soul. Three, that there is a relationship with this institution. So when we can just on a fundamental level make sure those pieces are in place, people pay for what they value. And so I value my life is valued. And so that is, to me, the approach that I've used for years.
Roy, do you have additional?
Yeah, I mean, I think on a really basic level, I think it like, I've seen so many examples here in the UK where it has proven that just the content of the work sometimes is enough to engage people to come. If people know that it's about them and they know that it's a space that will welcome them, I think that in itself is a very, very clear invitation. Where you advertise this work is a really clear invitation as well. But I think a huge part of what makes some of that possible is listening to the artists that are making the work, who are closely connected to those communities, but also having the people within your organizations who represent those communities. If your organization doesn't reflect the audiences that you want your theater to welcome, then you are already outsourcing. So there is already like a removal of connection between yourself as an organization and the audiences. So I think that there's something about like the workforce that is really important. And I know that's a really difficult thing because that's like swapping out, and you can't do that. But I do think that like workforce is a really important thing with regards to audiences.
Well, that leads. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to
Oh,
step in. Please
I
finish.
was going to say one other tiny thing, if that's all right, Jill. Sorry.
Please.
That is oh gosh.
You're too young to forget.
Yeah.
There's so much in my
And there is so much coming through. Roy, as you were saying that, maybe I'll talk and it will help you come back, and please do. But what made me want to interject is that there are questions about, well, you know, in this virtual room, there's a spectrum of experiences and work that has been done in diversity and equity. And in some organizations, it's been deep and long, and in some organizations, it's fairly new. So in a variety of ways, this question is being asked. If I'm new at this, if my organization is new at this, what can I do to support and learn without being tokenistic or jumping on a time-based bandwagon? What can I do to start?
I think I love that question. And I would suggest that you establish a committee, because it's not one person that leads this charge, and that it's of course it's internal, but it should absolutely involve the board of directors. So you need leadership as part of this. Then I would also recommend that your executive leadership lead this effort. And so with this committee led by executive, that the first thing you do is learn. So there's a reading that needs to happen. And so perhaps on a weekly basis, you are reading books and digesting them and articles so that you understand what this means. And then you think about a timeline. So how do we then apply this to our work? You know, and so you look internally at our staff development. What is the pipeline for people of color to advance? How do we make choices on the works that we use? Who are the vendors that we work with? Everything that you touch now goes through this lens of equity, diversity, inclusion. And then you may think about bringing in a consulting team that can help shape this initiative so that it really becomes integrated as to how you do business. So that would be my immediate response.
Yeah, I would echo that. It absolutely is organizational behavior. I think something so I'm joint artistic director with another brilliant artist called Bryony Shanahan, who is a white working class queer woman, and she's extraordinary. And one of the things that she said really simply is, if everybody is in the room with us, then we don't, you know, then essentially we're not trying to outsource the knowledge that we need. So creating those opportunities and pathways, I think, is really important. Having creating spaces within your organization where conversations that are not so easy become a part of your organization's behavior. The fact that you understand as an entire workforce that your job is to understand human beings, which is a huge part of what we do as creative people. It's empathy, and it's understanding and finding ways to represent those stories. So making sure that becomes a part of the way in which you work as an organization, so that everybody within that space is free and comfortable to bring forth ideas that they feel might be necessary. And it, you know, for us, it's like making sure that every voice is represented. It, you know, that feels so important, because it means that you can, you know, there will never be a season that we'll announce that doesn't have Black protagonists or Black writers in it, because there is no way on earth that I'm going to erase my experience from the work that I'm presenting. So if at executive and senior management level, in the positions where there is great influence, if you have those people in the room with you, it's impossible for you to ignore who those people are or forget, because I think ignore feels more active than to forget, because sometimes it is just that. It's like, oh God, we didn't think to, and that thoughtlessness isn't always, it isn't a violent act, but it can be perceived in an incredibly violent way. So, you know, as an artist or as an audience member, when I see announcements for shows from theaters, etc., when I don't see, if I look at a season and I go, there's no Black protagonist, you can guarantee there is no way that I will spend a penny in that theater. So if that is being communicated when you announce seasons over a year's worth of work or whatever, you know, that is what people on the outside are receiving, and we've got to remember that. That is what people are receiving, and also people aren't falling for the one Black show in the season trick anymore, because that one Black show in the season feels it like, you know, that does feel tokenistic, because there will never be a version of it where there is only one white show in the season.
Yeah.
And so as a Black audience member, you're going, oh, so now you want my money. Why wasn't I seen in the other shows? Why wasn't I invited to the other shows? You know, I think that's an important thing to think about as well.
Donna asked you both, I've got two questions. One came in advance and one is live. Donna asks, or Misty asks, Donna, you've written about inviting community groups into your building as a place to hold meetings. It might be an initial step. Obviously that's challenging right now. So how do we invite during a time of COVID? So that's the first question. And then the second that came in advance that we like in particular at TRG is what should we stop doing? So how do we invite in a time of COVID, and what should we stop doing?
Okay, so yes, I believe the digital platform is going to be around for a while. And so it's exactly as I quoted from our Dante Roy, you know, just walking through lightly with little baggage, ready to imagine another world. So here we are, we have another world. And so digitally, you know, we can transfer some of our programming online, but it goes back to relationships. Here's the time to start to build these long-lasting, meaningful relationships. So in New Jersey Performing Arts Center, where I work with the Community Engagement Department, we have 120 engaged partners. That means these are organizations that we have depth with, that we co-promote, that we build initiatives with, that we can call when we want to check out, should we do this? That I know their personal story, they know mine. We have relationships. That takes time. And so now we can do this. So you think about, who is it that I want to engage as part of my family? Build that list and start to call, have Zoom calls, and talk to them. How can we deepen our relationship? What can we build together? So it's an invitation. And so, it's looking at your product, your content, to see what can we then develop and build together. So just keeping in mind, when we talk about building audiences, the audiences that we want to develop, they're doing fine. There is no devoid, their lives are not devoid of arts and culture. They've made other choices, it's just not you. So now you have to be the one to court them. You have to be proactive. You can't expect them to just come running because you picked up the phone. So it has to be meaningful and well thought out. It's important the person who's doing the calling, that they sincerely believe that this is the best thing for our institution at this time. If they're doing it because they were asked to, this becomes very transparent and you won't get a call back. You know, no one wants to participate. So first, we have to do some self-reflection. How did I get to this place anyway? Why is it that in 2020, I don't have a list of engaged partners? I haven't been doing this. So you have to answer that question. So this isn't a time to feel bad. This is a time to decide I'm going to change. So take the Band-Aid off quickly. No more Band-Aids. Done with that in the new century. So that also answers what not to do, what to stop doing. This expectation that people are going to come, or if I just put it on the stage, you're going to respond. No, they're not. We're doing fine. We really are in terms of arts and culture. So, but to be a part of this experience would be great. And so stop deciding that I know what people think. I know how they're going to respond. Be quiet and listen with a generous heart. Really listen. Yes.
Roy, I'm going to ask you a different question posed by Bradley. Some consultants he's observing are, especially in the orchestra field, but I think this could be viewed writ large, are suggesting we should double down on core audiences, not build new. Do you have ideas, or have you seen examples of how to highlight the return on investment, how to make the case for the financial case for bringing in new people, so that, as you both are talking about, people do have art in their lives, and they're choosing us. I think the question is, how do you make the case, the financial case?
I mean, it's weird because it feels really simple to me, which is that Black people have money too.
So, okay.
So if you like money and you want to make money, then in the same way that anybody running any business puts an investment into advertising and building a relationship with those people that become that core, that essentially is exactly the same thing that you're doing. I mean, I can't, I feel like, film and television have been so much quicker and smarter than us at doing it, the way, which makes me really sad, because, as live art institutions, we understand that we can be quicker, we can be more nimble, we can be more, that's what we are, or it's at least in the UK, that is the narrative that we present. But actually, I'm seeing so much more progress in television, in film, so much more. But it feels as if, our live art institutions are like the last bastion, essentially, really, of white supremacy and elitism. So there has to be so much work done. One, to stop you, one, to understand that is the way that you're perceived. Two, to understand why that is, and know that you are a part of that narrative, and that you have a part to play in unraveling that, if that is what you would wish to do. And then three, that you've got to pay, you've got to do the work and expect that it might come and it might not come, just like any risk that you might make with any business. But the very simple answer is that if it is a financial thing that you're looking for, your money is green. That's the color of the money. And if you want the money, then you need to be doing the work to chase that money. But if it isn't that, if it's deeper than that, then I would suggest that you think about and answer all of those amazing questions that Donna just posed, with regards to the reflection that needs to be done for people personally and as an organization.
Donna, I'm going to hand the mic to you here. There are so many questions coming in, and we will find ways to ensure that we get them shared and to both of you, so that in our LinkedIn group we might continue this conversation as needed. But I want to direct and perhaps offer an opportunity for you both to wrap up. The question about measuring and reporting on success.
Sure.
Roy, you so potently describe one measure as a result of that specific question, but how we measure and report on it to drive accountability within our institutions. Anything else you'd like to say to wrap up, Roy? You too, and then I will move us toward our end.
Yes. So accountability internally, with the effort for equity, diversity, and inclusion, accessibility, is you establish what those metrics would look like. And so internally, everyone, there should be a cultural change. And so that you're noticing that the staff are speaking to people differently, that they're being more inclusive in how they're making choices, that there's a sensitivity and an awareness. So, you have to establish those very cleanly and clearly. And then externally, when we talk about, how we see more diverse audiences, I don't think it's all just numbers. How many more people did we get? Or this is a question I'm always asked. So did the people of color then come to see one of the regular plays? Why do they have to? Why does that have to be success? It's like going into a restaurant. You're telling me I can only order a hamburger with fries. I don't want that. I'm vegan. I will never want that. But I like this dish and I'm coming for this dish. And so we have to decide that we're going to stop curating the experiences of people of color, and we have to stop telling them what your experience should be, what the menu should look like. So that we got to get rid of, like, today. I would say that also in terms of measures of success, I would look at social media participation. I would look at how are we being discussed? How is this ever being discussed in their community? I think about what is the press is saying, what little press we have left. How are they documenting this? Because there's a narrative that goes along with this. We don't do it in the dark. I think organizations should announce loud and clear. We are focused on EDIA. This is how we're going to move forward. So there's accountability to the public as well. So those are just briefly some of the measurements. A lot more.
Donna.
We're out of
time. I mean, I was listening so intently, and yeah, those are really, really brilliant, Donna. I mean, measuring metrics, it's really hard, and I don't know necessarily that I have a very specific answer to that, but I would say that something that I want to do in my organization is make sure that no audience member feels alone as a person of color. So just having like a few is not success. It's like when those people feel safe that there is a number of them in that space, then I might be able to say that there is some success here, because it means that they will be coming into our spaces and seeing other people that look like them also enjoying inhabiting those spaces as well. And the same goes for workforce as well, that like just having one person of color in that room is definitely not enough. I think when your auditoriums and your workforces look like your experience getting on the subway, for instance, that's when you can say, yeah, I think we've done a good thing here. But until then, if we're not really reflecting the world outside, I don't know if we can be as bold or brazen to say that we're successful for the few numbers that we have here and there. I don't know. That doesn't seem very positive as a note to end on. But
well, let me just say, there's so much positive that both of you have brought to this conversation. And I'm so grateful for your like acute, clear statements of belief and calls to action. What is true is that today we are attending to this conversation with care. What I think we all in this room believe is that this conversation about diversity and inclusion and the other, whatever the other looks like, it's a critical part of the arts and cultural, it must be a critical part of the arts and cultural future. And increasingly, we're seeing evidence, research, and conversation about its power, about its fuel for something that's so important. Listen, I can't thank you both enough, and really want to encourage all of you who have been listening today to continue to engage with questions as I'm wrapping up here. We'll get them to our guests and find a way to continue the conversation as we go in TRG 30. I want to say again, thank you. May the force be with both of you in these coming weeks and months as we navigate through this time of twin pandemics. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this week's TRG 45. We'll see you next week.